you do when somebody sends you a threatening email? One of the hardest things that I have to do in my work is that I have to show up and be brave and be criticized and do things that I don't want to do and be front and center. And quite honestly, I prefer the comfortable, quiet life in the back. But I believe in this work and I believe in defending the value of women. And so I'm front and center. And being part of front and center is people send you emails that could be threatening, but maybe they're not realizing it. So I'm going to share with you a window to an email, just kind of a normal day in January's life. And here it goes. Dear Mrs. Donovan, if you're a practicing Catholic and authentically stand for women, which I do, and I am a practicing Catholic, parentheses, I don't imagine this would paint a nice PR picture for TWS, then this has to be front and center for the next short reel and next video, period. To me, the way I receive that is it's kind of a threatening email. Number two, what's the goal that you want to achieve? If you want somebody to have the courage to speak up against something that you believe is important, and in this particular situation, it's women in transgender prison, which obviously is an important topic. We don't want to send an email that makes threats to people. And the reason why this is kind of important to me, because number one, if I wasn't a practicing Catholic, this really puts a bad taste in my mouth of how Catholics actually communicate and threaten people. Wow, this person might not know what they're doing, but regardless if they know what they're doing or not, our actions have repercussions. So I think that number one, I want you to know that how we communicate determines how the message is being received. The best messages sometimes get lost by the messenger. If we're threatening people and saying, if you are, a practicing Catholic, then you have to do what I'm telling you to do, chances are we will repel people from what we actually hope they would do. Maybe knowingly or maybe unknowingly. I think secondly, there's this quote he adds in the line. It says, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is in a world is that good men do nothing. So basically implying that if I don't do it, I am obviously not standing up for what is good. That somehow I'm not authentically Catholic, and that this would be bad PR for the women's school. So here's my gentle challenge. Number one, speak kindly. Don't send threatening emails. Number two, ask questions. Ask and say, is this something you are called to do? Is this something you feel like God is asking you? To presume that I am going to do something out of a threat without discerning what God is asking of me is actually a sign of immaturity. We do not know what the person is being called to do. And regardless if there's a lot of good things out there, that might not be something I am called to do, and that is only between me and God. So to threaten somebody to speak up for truth without questioning the discernment process that they ought to have to do what is good is also hypocritical to me. Obviously, you can tell this is frustrating to me because, number one, if this is how people treat other people, we would not have many Catholics in our world. If Catholics are shoving truth down people's throat without curiosity, kindness, or proper discernment of assuming what their call is, we would lose people in our church. If we have people that didn't even say, hi, how are you? Thank you for your message. Thank you for your hard work. I really appreciate the work that you've done for women, and jump down your throat and say, oh, by the way, if you don't speak up, you're setting up for evil. How does that make me feel As a Catholic mom who's trying to live a saintly life in all my fallen nature, how do you think that makes me feel? Pretty trashy. So here's my gentle challenge. It would be better if, number one, you could send out an email and begin with praise, just kind of we do when we pray. Thank you for actually having the courage to do your work and respond to God. Number two, maybe ask a question and say, do you feel called to speak up to this? Is it possible that you would discern your way to speak up, because we need your voice out there to speak truth? And number three, don't threaten people to shove truth down their throat and expect them to actually not be angry. And to me, this is a much bigger issue of why we're losing people in our Catholic faith. I am a practicing Catholic. I am here to defend my faith. But I will also tell you, my biggest and greatest critics are those that are supposed to be practicing Catholic, who write emails like this, who have never taken the time to actually affirm the work or the call that God is asking of me, taking the time to listen to the fact that it takes a lot of courage for a mom of 8 to get smothered like this day in and day out and still get up every single morning, get on my knees, pray, and say, yes, Lord, they have smothered me for the sake of you, and they don't know my call, but I am here showing up for you. Number three, let us pay attention to the way we're acting and reacting to people, because we could be the very reason why people are leaving the church, including myself. I have to, at every God-given moment, take responsibility and accountability on how I can improve my communication, my facial expression, my ability to make people feel important, the way I judge people, the way I look at people, the way I talk to people, and say, what part do I have in actually causing people to draw closer to Christ or away from the truth? And so, to me, I feel called to rebuild our church in my own little plot of land, in my own little call. And for years, when people criticize the work that I do, when they don't know the pain that I've go through, I weep and cry, and it makes me want to give up. But through deep prayer, as of recent, I've realized that for me not to hold people accountable to a higher version of themselves and tolerate disrespect, especially from a man, this is coming from a man, by the way, which is a threat, is actually me tolerating the fact that this is why people leave the church. So yes, I am angry, and yes, I am hurt, and maybe you don't agree with me, but is it possible that in our disagreement, that in the difference of our opinion, that we can still remain charitable, respectful, and perhaps see with eyes of purity the heart of Christ? Because I'm actually really grateful that this email came to me, because I now have the opportunity to actually speak my heart and how I really feel about people who jump down your throat without ever knowing you and jump into criticism, because to me, it's the reason why so many people don't want to be Catholic. So if you're one of them, we've been one of them at one point. There's a Judas in all of us. I hope that we can take ownership and have the humility to say, oh, maybe I could have done that better. I forgive this person. I don't have anything against them. I don't know them. But I'm using it as an opportunity to actually challenge those faithful Catholics who have great intention, but perhaps lack the deep formation to communicate truth in a way that actually radiates Christ. So, how am I going to respond? Exactly like the way I'm responding to you. I'm going to share my heart. I'm going to hold them accountable. They're not going to like it, and they're not going to like me. And they're going to say, oh, TWS is misrepresenting, Catholic faith. People, I realize, have their own judgments. And unless their heart is open, I cannot actually let them see my heart, because their heart is made up and it's hardened. So I am not and no longer going to try to prove myself to be somebody that's faithful, to be somebody that actually truly wants to live a life of sanctity, just so that I can please this someone and not hold them accountable and play nice girl and play that's okay, because I do not believe it's okay. I do not believe we need to be shoving truth on people's throat, and I do not believe that we should act with this level of disrespect in the way we treat other people, especially those in the church that are working so hard, tirelessly, to defend the church, and they don't even know what it takes on a daily basis, because we don't know the heart of man. Only God knows. Bottom line, whether I respond to what he is asking of me in this comment, I haven't even really read it. It's about a minute long. It's about transgender in prison. Is actually really irrelevant, because the method in which we communicate is equally as important than actually the message itself, because that determines people hearing about Christ or not. And I think it's time that we look from within and say, maybe I'm the culprit. And I'm not just talking to you. I'm talking to me. I'm talking to me, constantly asking myself, how could I better communicate and radiate the light of Christ today, tomorrow, and every day for the rest of my life? We are all called to live saints. We are all called to live a life of truth, beauty, and goodness. We are all called to do our work in our unique, irreplaceable commission, our plot of land, so that one day God can say, "Oh, good and faithful servant." But that call needs to be discovered by every person, and that you have to do your work, I have to do my work, and let's not try to pretend that we know somebody else's call, especially when we don't know their heart. So I hope you receive this well, and I hope that in my challenge here for those faithful Catholics, you can see my heart. But if you don't, here's a great quote I've learned from Chris Crone. And it's a quote that I've adopted for myself for one reason. And I'll tell you the quote in a minute. I've adopted for one reason because my fear of not being accepted by the people I have fought so hard, my faithful Catholic family and friends, has actually silenced and held me back from pursuing God's call in my life, because I'm too busy worried about what they think of me. And I'm doing a disservice to what God is asking of me by staying silent, by staying quiet and not actually holding people accountable and just kind of saying, turning the left cheek. That is not what I'm called to in this moment. There's been moments where I am, but I have to respond and I'm accountable to God for what my call is. And so I'm not going to make people happy. And I trust that some people will be disappointed by how I actually hold people accountable. And that's okay. So here's a quote, and I have Chris Crone to thank, because I really am so grateful for who he is. And there's beautiful souls out there preaching truth, preaching beauty, and preaching goodness. And they actually are so attractive because they actually radiate the heart of Christ, even maybe they don't have the fullness of truth. And quite honestly, we can learn from them. So this is what I learned from Chris Crone, my new mentor, which I really deeply admire. Some people love me and some people don't. And that's okay. I value me. I love me. And to me, loving yourself comes from the scripture. Comes from the second commandment. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Learning to love ourselves is a prerequisite to loving our neighbor. So many of us have not been taught to love ourselves. Rah, 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 love yourself, all that fluff. It's not resonating. You cannot love what you do not know. Self-love requires us to know thyself. Self-awareness, which is exactly what this email is about, is being aware of how we communicate to other people. So have a great day. And to those that see the message and the heart of this message, thank you. For those that don't, I bless you.